So last week we had our first class, and what we discovered last week was that Hebrew is called Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language, holy meaning different, separate, unusual, in that it's really quite different from virtually every other language of the thousands of languages in the world. We saw that the words in Hebrew are not arbitrary. The words in Hebrew have intrinsic connection to the things they describe. And we saw that even more incredibly is that the letters of the Hebrew words, all the letters that make up all the words, each letter also has incredibly profound spiritual meaning. The Jewish mystics taught that the Hebrew letters are the building blocks of creation, that God created the world through the Hebrew letters. They are the DNA of the physical world. The Hebrew letters capture the will of God that's expressed in the creation story when God said, "Let there be light," etc. We saw last week that Hebrew is incredibly consistent with the world of reality. We saw a number of examples. I'll share one or two more with you tonight as we tie up some loose ends. You'll see that the first word on our sheet here is the Hebrew word shana. Shana is the word for year. Shana is year, like in Rosh Hashanah. The letters of shana, shin is 300, nun is 50, hey is 5. 355, the numerical value of the word year. And that's because the Hebrew year is essentially a lunar year. It's a lunar year that is corrected for the solar calendar. But the Hebrew months are lunar months, and the number of days in a Hebrew year are 354 and a fraction. So the word Shana maybe just coincidentally happens to come out to be essentially the same number of days as in a Hebrew year, or maybe it's not an accident. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a famous book called The Tipping Point, and I would propose that it's very easy to take any of the examples we'll be studying in this class and chalk it up to coincidence, but I would say that after hundreds of thousands of coincidences, it just reaches a tipping point where it becomes very, very difficult to say, well, it's another coincidence. You can have a few coincidences, but after a while, it's very difficult to say that a coin that's flipped 700 times that comes up heads each time was just luck. You'd probably be very, very likely to suggest it was a double-headed coin. One of the things we learned last week is that we can discern the meaning of the Hebrew letters by examining the name of the letter. The name of each letter tells you about the meaning of the letter, the sound of the letter, the numerical value of the letter, the shape of the letter, something that we refer to as the code of first words. Where is the first time that letter appears at the beginning of a word in the Bible? And so last week we studied the first letter of the alphabet, the letter Aleph, and we learned, based upon all these factors, that the letter Aleph conveys the idea of godliness, of divinity, that transforms our world and that suffuses our world. Once we know that the Aleph indicates divinity, we looked at the word Adam. Adam, the word for man, for human being. And we saw that you could divide this word Adam into two parts. There's the Aleph, the divine, godly, spiritual part of each human being. And then there's the physical part, reflected in the letters Daled Mem, Dam, blood. Throughout the Bible, the blood of a person, the blood of an animal, is considered the physical life force of the animal. And so we have the human being in the Bible is created from the dust of the earth. It's a physical human being. But then God breathes the breath of life into that physical form, and we have a full human being, both physical and spiritual. One of the things we looked at last week was that this part, the physical part, the letters Mem 40 and Daled 4 add up to 44. And we saw that there are two components that really bring forth the physical part. The Talmud says that there are three partners in the creation of each person. There's God, which contributes the godly part, and then there are the parents, which contribute the physical part. And we saw the Hebrew words for mommy and daddy, for mom and dad, Av and Aim, add up to the numbers 44. Av is Aleph Bet, 1 and 2 is 3. Aim is Aleph and Mem, 1 and 40, 41. So 41 plus 3, 44. So Dam, the physical part, is 44. If you look on the sheets that I gave out tonight, what's interesting is that science tells us that each human being has 23 pairs of chromosomes. There are 22 pairs of chromosomes we get from each parent, and interestingly, each of those chromosome pairs looks almost the same, and there's a 23rd set of chromosomes which does not look the same. It's in the lower right-hand corner of the box, and that determines what sex the child would be. But interestingly, it seems that the Dam here, the 44, is 22 sets of chromosomes from each parent. And they're double, so it's 44. Again, is it a coincidence that 44 comes up as the number for the physical part of who we are and the number of chromosomes that each parent gives? I'll leave that for you to decide. Now, I'm going to try to move a little bit further tonight and take up from where we left off last week. The Bible teaches us in the book of Yirmiyahu, the 10th chapter of Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, verse 10, that God is truth. The prophet tells us God is truth, and that's why when we say Kriyat Shema, we say the Shema, we add on the word Emet at the end. Adonai Elohechem Emet. It's not part of the actual reading of the Shema in the Torah, but we add it on because it says in Yirmiyahu, Jeremiah, that God is Emet, God is truth. Now we're going to look a little bit tonight at this word, Emet, truth. We're going to find it's going to be a fascinating word. You'll see, first of all, that it looks similar to the word Adam, human being, in terms of its structure. The human being is Dam, 40 and 4. Emet is the Taf and the Mem, 440. Each begins with an Aleph. When you take away the Aleph from the human being, you're left just with Dam, with blood. You take away the Aleph, the godliness, from truth, Emet, and you're left with the word mate, which means death. How do we see that this word Emet is connected to godliness and to God? Here we have the word Emet we see as a total of 441. Again, Taf is 400, Mem is 40, Aleph is 1, 441. We learned last week that when God told Moses to go down to Egypt and tell the Jewish people that you're going to be liberated, Moses was very, very concerned. And Moses says to God, yeah, but what if the Jewish people asked me your name? It's a peculiar question, right? We would have thought Moses would say, what if they ask me, how are you going to do it? The Egyptians don't let anybody out of this country. But Moses is concerned, what if they ask me, the Jewish people ask me your name? And we saw last week that the name in the Bible captures the essence of the person, the being that bears that name. So when the Jewish people are going to ask Moses, what is God's name? What they're really asking is, who is God? Who is this God that you're talking about? So God says to Moses, you know who is sending you? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Tell them that Ehyeh is sending you. Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, I will be what I will be. We saw that each of these three words begins with an Aleph. It's one of the most important names of God. We saw again the Aleph is the letter for divinity, for godliness. And here we have the phrase, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. And you may not be able to see it, but we'll add them up. The name Ehyeh, I will be, Aleph is 1, Hey is 5, Yud is 10, Hey is 5. So it's 5, 10, 5, 1, for a total of 21. So it's Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. Ehyeh by Ehyeh, or 21 times 21, for a total of 441. The name, I will be what I will be, when you swear I will be, it adds up to the number of the word emet, truth. There's a connection between God and truth. By the way, just interestingly, if you take the names of the three patriarchs, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the first letter of each of those names is 21. Abraham, Aleph, Yitzchak, Yud is 10, Yaakov, Yud is 10, so Abraham, Aleph is 1, Yitzchak, Yud 10, Yaakov, Yud 10. So the three patriarchs, the first letter of their names adds up to 21. Also interesting that the first letter of each of the 5 books of Moses, the first letter in the book of Genesis, of Bereshit, we saw last week, was the letter Beit, Bereshit. Bereshit, in the beginning. The first letter in the second book of the Bible. Second book is called Exodus in English, but in Hebrew, Shmot, and it begins with the word Ve'ele. And these are the names. So we have Beit in Bereshit, the number 2. Vav in Ve'ele. The third book of the Bible, Vayikra, and God called to Moses. Vayikra begins with a Vav, again the number 6. The fourth book of the Bible, Bamidbar, begins with the word Vayidaber, and God spoke to Moses. Again, Vav, Vayidaber, the number 6. And finally, the last book of the 5 books of Moses, Dvarim, begins, Eile HaDvarim, these are the words. So the first letter of each of the 5 books of Moses is Bet, 2, Vav, 6, Vav, 6, Vav, 6, and Aleph, 1, for a total of 21. That we have a tendency to be able to find this clue to godliness all over the Bible, as we'll be seeing tonight. There's an expression in Hebrew which says, Rosh Devarcha Emet. The beginning of your words are truth. We say it in one of our prayers on Shabbat, and it's a very famous expression, and the rabbis find numerous hints that the beginning of God's word is truth. The first 3 words of the Bible, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created. And if you take the last letter of each of these words, the last letter of Bereshit is a Taf, the last letter of bara an Aleph, the last letter Elokim is a Mem. For the word Emet, Aleph, Mem, Taf, if you scramble them. So within the first 3 letters, a clue to God being truth. I'll just tell you a cute story while we're on the topic of the first 3 words. It's a story I've told before. If you haven't heard it, it's very cute. There was once an apostate Jew who came to the great Vilna Gaon, Elijah of Vilna, one of the greatest sages in rabbinic Judaism, lived about 300 years ago, and he said to this great rabbi, I'm going to prove to you the truth of Christianity from the very first word in the Bible. And he says to the Vilna Gaon, look at the first word in the Hebrew Bible, the word Bereshit. The first 3 letters, Beis, Reish, Aleph, Ben, Ruach, Av, Son, Spirit, Father. The first 3 letters. So the Vilna Gaon immediately said to him, you didn't read the rest of the word. The rest of the word says Shin, Yud, Taf. Spells out Toras, Yeshu, Sheker. The teachings of Jesus are falsehood. So we're going to see that there's a lot of things that are included in this very first word of the Bible. Actually, it was the Vilna Gaon that taught that almost everything that will ever take place to the Jewish people is hinted at in this very first word of the Bible. One of the things we see about the word emet, truth, is that the word itself tells us a lot about what it is. The word emet begins with an aleph, which is the first letter of the alphabet. It ends with a taf, which is the last letter of the alphabet. And in the middle is the mem, which is the middle letter of the alphabet. So the word truth is truth from the beginning to the end, thoroughly all the way through the first, the middle, and the last. Also, we have an expression in Hebrew which has a very similar expression in English. In English, we say, if something is true, then it has a leg to stand on. In Hebrew, we say, yesh raglayim ledavar. The thing has legs, it has feet. If something is not true, we say it doesn't have a leg to stand on. So if you look at the word emet, you'll see that each letter in the word emet has two legs. The aleph stands on 2 points, the mem stands on 2 points, the taf stands on 2 points. So every single letter in the word emet is the beginning, the middle, the end of the alphabet. Every letter has 2 feet. And then something fascinating happens with the numerical value of emet. Emet is 441. If you take those numbers, 4, 4, 1, add them together, you get a 9. So truth is always associated with the number 9. One of the fascinating things about the number 9 is that whatever number you multiply 9 by, if you take the total and add up all the digits, you get 9. So 9 times 2 is 18, 1 and 8 is 9. 9 times 3 is 27, 2 and 7 is 9. You can multiply any two numbers, any number by 9. And it can be a very, very big number. You add up all the digits and you reduce it, it always comes out to 9 because truth is consistent. Truth never wavers. Truth stays on target. Now what's incredible is that we have the companion word to truth, which is falsehood. And we'll see that falsehood, rather than having its letters in the beginning, middle, and end of the alphabet, the letters sheker, if you look on your alphabet chart, cling together as almost the last 3 letters of the alphabet. It's the second to the last, third to the last, and fourth to the last letter of the alphabet. They all have to stay together to hold each other up. Because as we see, ein raglayim l'davar. Sheker, none of its letters have 2 feet. Each one of its letters stands on a base of 1 point. It's very wobbly. And because the letters are wobbly, they got to hold on to each other to support each other. What's interesting is that the number that corresponds to falsehood is not 9, it's 6. So the letters sheker are 300, 100, and 200 for a total of 600. 600 reduces down to 6. And the rabbis pointed out something fascinating. One of the questions that the rabbis discussed at great length, I forgot to bring this book here tonight. I have a whole book called Why Does the Torah Begin with a Bet? A whole book. Why does the Torah begin with the letter Bet? So the rabbis discussed this question. Why does it begin with the letter Bet? And they found something fascinating. If you begin counting the numbers from Aleph, meaning if you begin counting from Aleph, from the first letter, groups of 3, so you'll find 1 plus 2 plus 3 is equal to 6. Take the next 3. 4 plus 5 plus 6 is equal to 15. 1 and 5 is 6. The next 3. 7 plus 8 plus 9 is 24. 2 plus 4 is 6. Take the next 3. 10, 11, 12 equals 33. 3 plus 3 is 6. So when you start with the first letter, Aleph, you take every 3 letters, they add up to 6, which is the number of falsehood. However, if you begin with the bet and count every group of 3, so you get 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 9. 9 is the number for truth. The next set, 5 plus 6 plus 7 equals 18. 1 and 8 is 9. The next 3, 8, 9, and 10 equals 27. 2 plus 7 is 9. And you can keep on going and going and going like the ever-ready battery. And starting with the bet, you consistently will get 9, the number of truth. And we saw before, Rosh Devarcha Emet. The beginning of God's word has to be truth. So the Torah begins with a bet and not with an aleph. Furthermore, on the topic that we discussed last week, the idea that godliness is tied in to the number 1, echad, unity. That there's a unity that pervades this world because God is one. God is the source of everything. One of the teachings of the Zohar, the famous book of Kabbalah, says, Kutshibrichu ve'oraisa ve'Yisrael chad. That God, Kadosh Baruch Hu, and Yisrael and Israel and the Torah, Oraisa is Torah, are one. That the Zohar teaches us there's a unity between God and Israel and the Torah. Now, there's an incredible way of showing and demonstrating this unity. Here's how it goes. We have the three words that we're going to use tonight. God, we abbreviate as Hey, but it's Yud Hey Vav Hey. We learned last week God's essential name, the Tetragrammaton, Yud Hey Vav Hey, is 26. The word Torah is 406 and 7 and 5, a total of 611. Interestingly, by the way, as a side point, how do the rabbis know that there were 613 commandments in the Torah? So there's a verse in the Torah which says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe commanded us Torah. Moshe gave us Torah. Torah is 611. What's fascinating is when you look at the Aseret HaDibrot, the 10 utterances, the 10 statements that were given at Mount Sinai that we engraved on those tablets, the first two are different than the others. The first one says, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, in the first person. And the second one says, Lo yiyeh lecha Elohim acherim, there shall not be to you other gods before me. And then the third one switches to the third person. Don't take the name of the Lord your God, and it doesn't say don't take my name in vain. So the rabbis teach us that what happened at Mount Sinai was that God spoke the first two commandments, and all the Jewish people heard them, and we freaked out. It was too overwhelming for us to hear the voice of God, and so the Jewish people said, God, we can't take it, you just give the rest to Moses. So when the Torah says, Torah tziva lanu Moshe, Moshe gave us Torah. Torah is 611, but we got two from God. Total of 613. Azoy state in Maseches Makot, Tractate Makot explains that's how we know there are 613 commandments. And finally, the word Yisrael, Israel, 541. Yud is 10, Shin is 300, Resh 200, Aleph 1, Lamed 30. So how do we see the unity, how do we see the incredible unity of, again, God, Israel, and Torah? So watch how we do it. We begin with the first word in the Torah. The first word, Bereshit, ends with the letter Taf. Taf is the first letter of Torah. Taf is the first letter of Torah. So if we have Torah, we're starting with Torah now, we're going to get it by combining God and Israel. Israel is 541, Hashem is 26, for a total of 567. When you combine Yud Hey Vav Hey, the name of God of 26, and the name Israel, you get a number of 567. If you count, pay attention now, if you count from this first Taf in the word Bereshit, 567 letters forward in the Bible, from that Taf, guess what letter you're going to hit? Anyone want to guess? You hit the letter Vav. You have a Taf. 567 letters further, you get a Vav. From that Vav, you count another 567 letters. Guess what letter you're going to hit? Resh. You're going to hit a Resh. From that Resh, another 567 letters, you're going to get a Hey. So how do we find Torah? We find Torah by combining God and Israel, and we produce Torah from there. How do we get Israel? Well, interestingly, the last word in the 5 books of Moses is the word Yisrael. The last phrase says, all the miracles that Moshe did, Le'enei Kol Yisrael, in the eyes of all of Israel. So the last word is Yisrael. Starting from that Lamed, that last letter, from the Lamed in Israel, we're going to produce Israel by combining who? God and Torah. So God is 26 and Torah is 611 for a total of 637. So if you take the Lamed in Yisrael and you count back 637 letters going backwards, I'm sure you can guess what letter you're going to hit. You're going to hit an Aleph. And from that Aleph, if you go back another 637 letters, you're going to hit a Resh. And from that Resh, 637, you're going to get a Shin. And from that Shin, 637, you're going to get a Yud. You get Yisrael by combining God and Torah. And how are we going to get God? So here, we're going to go not to the beginning of the Torah and not to the end of the Torah. We're going to go to the very middle of the Torah. And the very middle of the Torah is the word gachon, which means belly. It's a verse in Leviticus, Vayikra, which speaks about the animals that crawl on their bellies. And taking the vav in that word gachon, we combine Torah and Israel. Torah 611, Israel 541, for a total of 1152. So from that vav in gachon, going backwards, 1152, what letter are we going to get? We're going to get a hey. And from that hey, going back 1152, we're going to get a yud. So now we have a yud and a hey and a vav over here. And if you go from this vav forward, 1152, what letter are you going to get? A hey. So we see that when the Zohar said that Kutshabrichu and Yisrael and Oraisa, that God, Israel, and Torah are one, there's a unity, it's incredibly reflected in the beginning, in the end, and in the middle words of the Torah. We see this unity between God, Israel, and Torah. Now, last week we shared some unbelievable biblical pointers to the year that the modern state of Israel was reconstituted. We saw last week that if you go to the year in the Bible that corresponds to the year 1948, you hit the verse of Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 3, which speaks about the Jewish people returning to their land from all over the earth, where they had been scattered. So if you follow this principle, every single year in history corresponds to a verse in the Bible. And the year for 1948 corresponds to a verse which describes the Jewish people coming back to their homeland from all across the world where they were scattered. We saw also last week that when the Bible speaks about the Jubilee, it speaks about it in a very strange way. It says, in this year of the Jubilee, people returned to their land. And we saw that the verse didn't have to say this year. It just should have said in the year of the Jubilee. And it spells the word return strangely. So we saw that if you take the word return in that verse in the Hebrew, it adds up to the Hebrew year for 1948. So when the verse says, in this year of the Jubilee, people return to their land, yes, in the year 1948, people returned to their land. The Vilna Gaon we mentioned before came up with another indication about this special year. He based it upon the Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin, page 38b. The Vilna Gaon found that the Talmud describes what happened during the first day of creation. And the Talmud tells you what happened at every single hour. In the first hour, this happened. In the second hour, this happened. In the third hour, this happened. And in the fifth hour of the sixth day, Adam rose up from the dirt, from the dust, in the fifth hour. The Vilna Gaon was very brilliant, and he did the following calculation. We have a principle in the Bible that every day is equal to 1,000 years. It's a verse in the book of Psalms. That 1,000 years in the eyes of God are like one day. So many of our rabbis would take the 6 days of creation and parallel them to the 6,000 years of history. The rabbis teach us that history will last 6,000 years at most. And then the Messianic age will have to begin. So the Vilna Gaon said that if the Talmud's telling us that Adam stood up in the fifth hour of the sixth day, we can actually figure out when that was. How do we do it? If we have 1,000 years for each day, so we have 1,000 years corresponding to the 5 days that passed, meaning that Adam stood up in the fifth hour of the sixth day. It meant 5 days already passed. So we have 5,000 years. Now he's going to stand up in the 5th hour of the 6th day, which means Friday, late in the morning. The Hebrew day begins in the evening before. Friday really begins Thursday night, let's say 6 o'clock. So you have 12 hours between Friday night, 6 o'clock, and 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday morning. That's another 500 years. So we have 5,000 years, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And now we have 500 years from Thursday night till Friday morning. And now we have 5 hours into the 6th day. So he did a very simple calculation. If 1,000 years equals 24 hours, how many years is in 1 hour? So you divide 1,000 by 24, and you get 41.6. Each hour is equal to 41.6 years. So 5 hours into the 5th day is 208 years. If you add all the numbers up, you get 5,000 plus 500 plus 208, which is 5,708. The Hebrew year 5,708, we saw last week, is the English year 1948. So the Vilna Gaon said that this is going to be a very special hour when Adam begins to arise from the dust, almost as if he prophetically anticipates that the beginning of the messianic process. The rabbis compared Adam to the Messiah. If you take the word Adam, the letters Aleph, Daled, Mem stand for Aleph, Adam, Daled, David, Mem, Mashiach. And there's a connection between Adam and David. Adam was supposed to die on the day he ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. We know that he was supposed to live there for 1,000 years, but Adam only lived to be 930 years. What happened to those 70 years? So the rabbis tell us that King David was supposed to be stillborn, and Adam gave those 70 years to David, and David is the progenitor of the Mashiach. So the Vilna Gaon is saying something's going to be happening where the beginning of this messianic process is going to start in the 5th hour of the 6th day, and it's going to be emerging out of the ashes. So emerging out of the ashes of the Shoah, we have in 1948, right after the Holocaust, right after 6 million of our brothers and sisters perished in the ashes, Adam starts to stand up. The beginning of this process of the messianic redemption is beginning. This is something that the Vilna Gaon predicted hundreds of years before 1948. Again, based upon what the Talmud tells us. Now I'm going to share with you in the next few minutes a theory which is being advocated by a number of teachers. I will share with you the caveat that's important to share. It's a controversial theory, and many scholars poo-poo this theory, but I know that many academics poo-poo the idea that God created the world. So the fact that academics poo-poo things, I don't necessarily want to run home. But I would say that what I'm going to propose now, I'm proposing provisionally, meaning I'm going to share with you something that I find interesting. I will not tell you that I find it overwhelmingly compelling and that it can be proven. But I think that it's interesting enough that I want to share it with you. There is a theory that Hebrew is the source of all languages in the world. There was a book written years ago by Isaac Moseson called The Word. And in this book he shows literally hundreds of Hebrew words and how they are related to many, many, many different languages in the world today. He later was involved with publishing this book called The Origin of the Speeches. I had to look twice for a moment. The Origin of the Speeches, which really puts forth his theory, which he calls Edenics, Eden, that he proposes that in the Garden of Eden, that there was a proto-Hebrew that was spoken, and that he finds Hebrew to be the source of all languages in the world. Let's look at something interesting. The Torah tells us in the 11th chapter of Genesis, verse 1, The Torah tells us, Vayehi kol haaretz safa achas udvarim achadim. The whole world, the whole earth was safa achas, one language, udvarim achadim, and singular words. They were all of one mind. What does it mean when it says the whole world, the whole earth, spoke one language? So in Rashi's commentary to the Torah, the commentary of Rashi, the most famous of all Jewish commentators, he wrote about 1,000 years ago in France. Just to give you an idea of how important Rashi is, there were over 500 people who wrote super commentaries to Rashi's commentary. You got to think about the value of someone who others thought was so important, they're going to spend a lifetime writing a commentary to his commentary, and not just 2 or 3, about 500 that we know of. So Rashi tells us on the spot there, what is safa echat? What is the one tongue? Rashi says 2 words, Lashon HaKodesh, the holy tongue, the holy language. He doesn't say Ivrit, by the way. He doesn't say Hebrew. He says the holy language, the holy tongue. So Rashi's telling you what was the one language that was spoken originally. It was Hebrew. Now, in 1980, I met with one of the greatest rabbis in the world. He passed away just a few years later. He was called the Steipler Gaon in Bnei Brak. And the Steipler Gaon published a book where he shows that very, very often the numerical value of Rashi's commentary is equivalent to the words he's commenting on. So the Steipler Gaon shows us that the numerical value of Safa Echat is actually equal to the numerical value of Lashon HaKodesh. The truth is, if you add up the numbers, it's off by 1. And there's a principle in Gematria, we'll learn about Gematria next week, that in the science of Gematria, you're allowed a fudge factor of 1 because it's supposed to include the value of the word itself. So if you add up the numbers of Safa Echat, it's equal to essentially Lashon HaKodesh, the holy language. The word in Hebrew, shoresh means source. Do you notice any similarity between the word shoresh and the English word source? Especially if you take the letter shin and you pronounce it as an S, which it can be pronounced. So, source. This is what Moseson proposes, that if you listen carefully to the similarities in language, you'll see there's just a consistent similarity between Hebrew and so many other languages. He proposes an idea of word families. So, for example, the Hebrew word min means from, and it's from the whole. It's from something. And he shows us that the Hebrew letters mem and nun, or M and N, mem and nun, apply to this idea of counting, numbering, things that you would count or number. For example, minyan is a counting. It's the group of 10 people that could pray together. Hamon are many. Limnot, to count. There are actually many, many Hebrew words where the mem and the nun have something to do with this idea of a part of something, or counting, or something that you would count. If you look at the English words, min is from. You could take something from something, you minus it. Minus mem and M and N. Diminish M and N. Then we have many, money, mammon, number, amount, numerous. Many, many, many words in this M and N family. So what I'm going to do with you now is a group participation exercise. I'm going to share with you a long list of words, and I'm going to ask you to try and figure out what is the English word that is related to the Hebrew. We're going to start on the right-hand side from the top. The first word on this list is the Hebrew word Adon. Adon can mean Mr., it can mean a great person, a special man. What might the English equivalent of Adon be? A Don. Like the Don? Don Corleone. Any other possible words that might be related to Adon? Adonis, right? He's an Adonis, right? He's a very special man that's overwhelming in terms of his presence. Okay, the next word on the list, Atik. In Hebrew, Atik means ancient. Atik means ancient. What might the English corresponding word be? Antique. Atik Hebrew, antique English. How about the Hebrew word ason? Ason in Hebrew is a donkey. Ason is a donkey. What might the English be? Ass or asinine. So we see ason, ass, asinine, there's a relationship. How about the Hebrew word gamal? How about the Hebrew word gamal? Gamal is, please. Gamal is camel. Well, that one is pretty easy. Gamal, camel, it's very, very right in front of you. It's right in front of you. How about the Hebrew word charov? Charov. What is charov? If you know what it is, you know what the English is. In English, we call it carob, right? Sometimes they call it St. John's bread or buxer. But charov in Hebrew is carob. Do you hear how carob is somehow connected to charov? Here, the Hebrew word is ikar. Ikar means the essence of something. What might the English equivalent be? Core. The core. The core of something. Ikar, core. Not C-O-R, where we eat our food from. But the core, right? You're exercising your core. So that's the word ikar. How about keren? On the altar in the temple, there were each corner, where keren is a corner. So do you see the relationship between keren and corner? Almost the same letters. Then you have the word in Hebrew, kefel, which means double. Anything come up for kefel in English? Couple. A couple, right? A couple is kefel, double. Here's a cute one. We say in Hebrew, mefunak. Mefunak in Hebrew means someone that's very sensitive and squeamish. What might the English equivalent be? Finicky. Finicky. A finicky person. Mefunak. How about in Hebrew, perek? Perek in Hebrew means a chapter or a portion. What might the English be? Part is not as good. Paragraph, not as good. How about perek, fraction? Right? Part of something, or portion, is a fraction of it. Perek, fraction, 3 letters. Pei, resh, kuk, fraction. The word peirot, very close to the English fruit. Peirot is fruit, it's fruit. Maher in Hebrew means quickly. Maher is quickly. What might the English be? Hurry. Maher, hurry. How about Yeled? Yeled in Hebrew means a child. What might the English equivalent be? Lad. A lad. Yeled, lad. Or laddie. Or lassie. How about Masecha? Masecha in Hebrew is a mask. Masecha, a mask. That's pretty straightforward. This we had last week. Prat in Hebrew. Prat is a part. Prat and part. Very similar. Then we have pras. Pras in Hebrew is a reward. What might the English be? Prize. Pras, prize. How about refes in Hebrew, which is garbage? Refes is garbage. Refuse. Refuse. Refes in Hebrew. Refuse in English. And then we have charat. Charat in Hebrew means to regret. You listen carefully, you can pick up tones of regret in charat. Then we have the word in Hebrew, ragil, which means routine or habitual.
Regular.
And regular, ragil, regular. And then we have rishima in Hebrew, which means a list. What might the English equivalent be? Resume. Rishima, resume, a list of your credentials. Then we have the Hebrew word orez, which is rice. Orez, rice, okay? That might be close enough. Rechush in Hebrew is a treasure. What might the English equivalent be for rechush? Riches. Rechush, riches, riches. And then how about reeve? Reeve in Hebrew is a fight or a quarrel. What might the English be for reeve? Rivalry. Reeve, rivalry. And how about sagur? Sagur in Hebrew means closed. What might the English equivalent be? Secure. Sagur, secure. Tzad in Hebrew. Well, tzad is pretty close to the English. Tzad means a side. Tzad, side. Otsar in Hebrew. Otsar is a treasury. What might the English equivalent be of otsar? This is a hard one. Store. Otsar is a store. Contains a lot of things. The Hebrew word noval. Noval in Hebrew means someone that is despicable. What might the English equivalent of noval be? Vile. Noval is someone despicable. Noval is vile. How about zimain? Zimain in Hebrew means to call up or to convene. What might the English equivalent of zimain be? To summon. To summon someone. You're going to summon them to the court. How about the word yilel? Yilel in Hebrew means to scream. In English, you might say, yell. Then we have the word yonek, which is a nursing baby. What might the English equivalent of yonek be? Young. Yonek, young. And then the Hebrew word zariz, which means quick or with alacrity. The English might be zariz, zealous. Zariz, someone who's zealous. Then we have the Hebrew word to'eva. To'eva, which is a disgusting act. What might the English equivalent of to'eva be? Taboo. To'eva, something that's taboo. Then we have the Hebrew word trafim. Trafim are idols or statues. What might the English equivalent of trafim be? Trophies. Trafim, trophies. And then we have the word trufa. Trufa in Hebrew means medicine. The English might be therapy. Very good. Trufa, medicine or therapy. Then the word shesh in many languages is 6. Lavan in Hebrew is white. Chalav is milk. What might the English equivalent be? For lavan and chalav, milk and white. How about albino? Albino has that lamed base nun in there for white, lavan. The Hebrew word kol means all. Kol, all, it's all. Asham in Hebrew means guilt. And the English might be shame, ashamed. And then we have the word or, light. What might be the English equivalent of or, light? Aura, right? What does aurora mean? Aside from being a place north of here. Is aurora related to light in any way? Okay, so aura and aurora coming from the Hebrew or for light. Then we have the word derech. Derech in Hebrew means way or path. And the English word might be direction. Very good. Derech, direction. I have a few more here. I have the word avel, in Hebrew, ayin bet lamed, which means someone that's doing something unrighteous. And that might be the word in English, evil. And then the word pleta in Hebrew, which means to escape. It might be the English word flee, right? Pleta, flee. And finally, the Hebrew word goren is a place of threshing. And so what would the English equivalent of goren be? Granary or grain. This is just, 30 or so examples. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. So again, is it a coincidence, or maybe there's more to the story? Let's go further. I'm going to share with you a story from the Bible. This is a famous story where Jacob is leaving his father's house, and he goes down to sleep, and he has a dream of a ladder. The ladder is connecting the earth to the heavens. He sees angels going up and down. And he wakes up from his sleep and he says, "Surely God is present in this place, and I did not know." I'll just refer you to a very fascinating book written in English, an entire book written on this verse. It's based upon a redundancy in the verse. It says in the Hebrew, "Va'ani lo yadati." Now in Hebrew, lo yadati means I did not know. So to say va'ani lo yadati literally would be, and I did not know. So Rabbi Lawrence Kushner wrote a very, very wonderful book on this one verse and sharing a number of different approaches. And there were great Hasidic Rebbes that explained this verse in interesting ways. The Midrash says that for over 20 years, Jacob never slept. When he was studying in the yeshiva of Shem and Aver, the Midrash says that he never slept. He thought sleeping was a waste of time. So he didn't sleep, he studied the whole time. This was the first night he ever slept in years. And he wakes up and he says, "Look, God is in this place and I didn't know." So the Hasidic masters say, you know what he was saying? That sleeping could be a godly act. I just never knew about it. If you sleep for the proper reasons and you sleep for the proper motivation, sleeping could be a spiritual activity. So he wakes up, he says, "Surely God is present in this place, and I did not know." And he became frightened, and he said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the abode of God, and this is the gate of the heavens." The rabbis teach us that this place was the place where later the Holy Temple would be built in Jerusalem. Jacob arose early in the morning and took the stone that he placed around his head. Now, if you read the story, it says before he went to sleep, he put a whole bunch of stones around his head. A whole bunch of stones. And now it says he took the stone that was from under his head. So the rabbis have a famous midrash where they say that the stones all fought with each other. Each one wanted to be the stone on which this righteous person would put his head. So the midrash says that they all fought, and God made them all into one stone, and he rested on that one stone. So many, many, many years ago, when a famous Jewish scientist came to New York to a synagogue on Shabbat, and it was this Shabbat that this story is read, the rabbi was introducing this famous Jewish scientist, physicist, and said that in the midrash, the rabbis say that all of these stones represented another character trait. One stone represented honesty, and one represented humility, and one represented alacrity. And then all the stones were combined into one stone in Yiddish, Einstein. It was an introduction to Albert Einstein. So he took this stone from under his head, and he set up a pillar, and he poured oil on top of the pillar. And he named the place Bet El, the house of God. But the Torah tells us that originally the name of this place was Luz. The place was originally called Luz. It's sort of strange. The Torah doesn't usually engage in like Jewish geography. Now they're in this place, but a long time ago it was called by another name. This idea of the Luz is very interesting. This is the place where they were going to build the temple in the future. The rabbis teach that the Luz is actually a bone at the top of your neck. The rabbis teach that it's the only part of our body that will never disintegrate. And that when we get resurrected in the future, our body resurrects. It resurrects out of that bone called the Luz bone. The rabbis teach us that that Luz bone is nourished, it's nourished by the food that we eat during the Malava Malka. The Malava Malka is the meal that we eat after the Sabbath, late Saturday night. What's going on here? So let's look at this word luz, and let's look at the three letters that make up the word luz. The word luz has the letter vav in it. Now, what is a vav in Hebrew? Vav is a fascinating letter. What does the word in Hebrew vav mean? So in Hebrew, vav is a hook. A vav is a hook. And the letter vav is shaped like a hook. And what is the letter vav used for in Hebrew? In Hebrew, the vav is the conjunctive. It's the connector, meaning that it's this person, that person, and. It's this and, the vav in Hebrew means and, meaning that the vav hooks two things together. It hooks together this and that. So the vav means hook, it looks like a hook, and it's the word and, it's the conjunction, it combines two things together. That's the letter vav. I'll tell you something fascinating. When the Mishkan was built in the desert, the portable sanctuary, the portable temple that was built before we came to the land of Israel, there was a courtyard. And the courtyard had a big curtain around it. And the curtain was held up by columns. The columns, in Hebrew, a column is called an amud. And on top of the column, there was a hook. There was a hook to hold the curtain. So those hooks on top of those columns are called the vavei ha'amudim, the hooks of the columns. I think we have someone in the room that's a Balkoreh, that reads the Torah on Shabbat. Is that correct? So if you've ever seen a Torah, you'll know that a Torah is written in columns. Torah is written in columns. Each column is called an amud. And if you look at these columns on a Torah scroll, about 99.9 of them begin with the same letter. Interestingly, almost every single column of a Torah scroll begins with the letter Vav, and those are called the Vavei Ha'amudim, the Vavs of these columns in the Torah. So we have the Vavei Ha'amudim, the hooks on top of the columns in the sanctuary, and then we have the Vavei Ha'amudim, the Vavs of the Amudim, of the columns in a Torah scroll. Then we have the letter Zayin. Zayin in Hebrew means a weapon. Zayin is a weapon. Kli Zayin are weapons. It's supposed to actually look like a sword. A Zayin is supposed to look like a sword with a handle and a sharp point. What's interesting is that the word Zayin in Hebrew also has the connotation of food. Mazon is food. Birkat HaMazon, the grace after food. Hazan et ha'olam kulo, God sustains the whole world. So Zayin, Kli Zayin are weapons. A Zayin is a sword. But the word Zan in Hebrew means to sustain, nourish, and it refers to food. What's interesting is that in the Bible, the same word is used for a sword and for food. So, for example, what is a sword called in Hebrew? A knife is sometimes called in Hebrew a ma'achelet. A ma'achelet. Ma'achelet, a knife, and it has the word ochel, to eat. Another word in Hebrew, the word for bread, lechem, is also related to the word lochem, to fight, to battle. So we see there's some kind of a connection between fighting, battling, weapons, and eating and food. Because you know what people normally fight about? The basics, food, sustenance. So here we have this word, which is a word for fighting, for weapons, and for food, for sustenance. Then we have the letter Lamed. Lamed in Hebrew is the letter which means to teach and to learn. Lilmod is to study. Lilamed is to teach. A malamed is a teacher. A talmid is a student. And the rabbis teach us, the Kabbalistic writings say that it's shaped where the divine wisdom, the lamed latap, goes all the way up. So the divine wisdom is brought down on this channel here, like the eaves trough of a house brings down the water. The lamed is bringing down knowledge and wisdom. And what's interesting is we see the shape of the letter lamed is similar to the shape of the letter aleph. Aleph we saw meant both a leader, a king, a powerful person, aluf. But aleph we saw also meant teaching, wisdom. The word lamed, teaching, has a letter chaf. Chaf is the number 20, and vav for 6, 26. So the lamed is made up of the letter chaf, 20, and vav 6. 26 is God's name, Yud K Vav K. So there's an idea that this divine wisdom comes down to the earth. This is teaching and education and learning. This is a spiritual kind of wisdom. So when we have the word lose, the word is a pictogram. It's saying that the lamed is being connected to the zayin. The vav is a letter of connection. The vav is a hook. The vav means and. The vav connects, brings things together. So luz is a place where the lamed, where spirituality is connected to zayin, sustenance, the basics of physical life in this world. That's what is meant by luz. It's the connection of the spiritual to the physical. Fascinating. That the neck is a part of our body that connects the head with the rest of the body. The luz is that place of connection between the spiritual part of us and the physical part of us. What sustains the luz bone? It's the meal that's eaten right after the Shabbat. The Shabbat is that day of pure spirituality. The rest of the week is the weekdays. It's the normal weekdays. And it's the point between the Sabbath and the rest of the week. It's that connection. And what is the temple? The temple is that spot in the world that connects the heavens and the earth. So this place where Jacob was, when the Bible tells us that its original name was Luz, it's a very, very important thing we're learning here. It's telling us a whole world about this place. In one further story of the Bible, in Genesis chapter 45, we're told that Joseph fell upon his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept upon his neck. And the rabbis teach us that when they wept upon each other's neck, they were crying over the temples that will be destroyed in the future. And the idea is that the neck is what symbolizes the temple. The temple is the place, again, that connects the heavens with the earth. So the neck of the body is that place that connects the upper parts of the body with the lower parts of the body. And so the word luz is an incredible word that we can only understand if we have a little bit of insight into what these Hebrew letters mean.